Well, yesterday, the Bronx gathered at World Changers Church on Grand Concourse for the funeral of Officer Soto's Familia, who was fatally shot last week here in our borough. This year, 69 officers have died in the line of duty in the country, according to numbers from Officers Down Memorial page. Here now to talk more, we welcome now Joseph Imperatrice, who's from Blue Lives Matter New York, and he shares with us a little bit about yesterday's service and the ongoing challenge for law enforcement. And first of all, our condolences to the family of Blue. We know about this, and then also, as I was sharing before, the state troopers actually lost their life upstate New York. And it just is, if you're in law enforcement, a real tough season.
Since 2014, we've had 6 NYPD officers killed in the line of duty, and incidents like last week with Officer Familia takes you back to those days, and you wonder, when is it going to stop? When is it going to be enough? The state trooper that was killed. And you go to these funerals and you see that sea of blue, and you see officers, because they're human beings, shedding tears and consoling one another. And the human emotion comes out. But the next day, you're back on that street. You're doing the best you could do, because that's what we do as officers. We protect New York City. But it doesn't get any easier, whether it was Officer Familia or Ramos and Liu almost 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about it, I remember Officer Wenjin Liu and Officer Ramos and talking about that and covering that, just the raw emotion that was actually felt, not just amongst police officers, but literally across the city, because I think in a moment such as this, you recognize that with all the challenges that law enforcement faces, that one day your life can just be changed dramatically.
Or you lead into it. They always say that tomorrow's not guaranteed, but either is the rest of today. And someone like George Lopez yesterday that goes on and says that police need to get deported, and you have political figures that stand in front of a podium and kind of put gasoline to a fire. And that's what happens. You have people who are emotionally disturbed, they feed into it, they go out and cause these killings or assassinations. And it does start with the top, with the leadership, but I think us as a community need to come together. I think gun violence all over the city, you see it in Chicago, is a big issue. We need to put aside our differences, get the emotions out on both sides, no matter if you're an officer or not, and help one another. This city could be a great place. It is. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to stop talking about it in Facebook tweets and worrying about whether the mayor is here or in Germany. That doesn't matter. What matters is you don't need a 9/11 to happen to come together. And I think we need to start realizing that.
What is the biggest challenge, you think, in terms of bridging the gap between police and community? Because obviously we see a lot of stuff on social media, but what from your perspective can be done to improve that relationship?
Conversation. I think a lot of media stations go out there and they give a false narrative. And if you don't know and you're misinformed, you believe it. Mm-hmm. Just like when you read the papers, there's always things that are missing. We need to get the truth out. When you're able to work together with the truth, you see it from a different side. We're supposed to work together, not try to tear each other apart. And the problem is nowadays is everything is politically correct. Oh, Republicans or Democrats. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Whatever happened, just doing things was the right thing to do. That's the issue. It's pointing the finger. No, you're wrong. You're wrong. No. That stuff has to stop. We have to be adults. I think everything's watered down. Just take it back to the basics and start doing things that really matter.
Mm-hmm. Take me back to yesterday for a minute. Obviously, a lot of sentiments were shared. A lot of officers, as you said, very raw in the emotions, and it's something we don't normally see from behind the badge. Walk us behind the badge to give us a little bit of a better perspective of what it's like and what do you feel when you're out there?
You want to know what's incredible? The NYPD, they make movies about us, Hollywood movies, and when you're standing there and you have all the emotions going on, you see law enforcement from all over the nation. We saw Montreal yesterday take a ride out here to support us. And you see that we're not much different. I like to say law enforcement is like the all-star team of the United States, because everyone from every background wears that uniform. It's a job, and I think one of the best figures, I think this last week, has been Police Commissioner O'Neill. He has been amazing. Mm-hmm. He went to the swearing-in ceremony and told the new recruits, you're gonna have some great days and you're gonna have some really bad days. And the great days are gonna outweigh the bad days, but days like Officer Familia, you're gonna get down and feel like you can't get up. And you're going to get up, and you're going to put that uniform on, because you're going to do it in memory of those officers. And over at that funeral yesterday, I think it was incredible what he said. Where is the uproar? Where are these people in the streets when not just an officer, but one of your own in the community who lives in the Bronx is shot and killed in cold blood? Where is everyone? So he was incredible, standing up there and saying, we need to come together, put our differences aside, and let's start standing up for what we really need to. Violence is a big issue. Gun violence is a really big issue. And like I said, we really need to start coming together and start putting into perspective what really matters.
Give me a gauge about morale right now. What's morale like?
morale as an officer, not just in New York City, all over, is, I'm going to say, a little bit low. We started Blue Lives about 3 years ago because from within, the morale was so low. And the way I feel it is, if you're happy from within and you love doing your job no matter what it is, you give a better product. And the community then could relate to it, and now you're working together. We actually came out with a video. It's at beyondtheline.us, and it shows exactly what we do and how we support the families and how we're able to boost morale from all the I'm gonna say the charity work that we do. So I think people should go and see the difference. You also see the families, the raw emotions of how they met their loved ones, and also the days that they remember of exactly the temperature and what they were wearing on a day when they lost their loved ones. So I think it's a good piece for people to go and check out.
And so, for people who don't know about your organization, share a little bit about it.
Back in 2014, it was rough. We had, and it hits home for all of us. You have the Eric Gardner situation here. You have St. Louis. You have Baltimore, and every day you woke up and it was something negative about police officers in the news, and there were riots and protests, and it was just every day police officers were portrayed as just these terrible human beings. And tying into the morale issue was terrible. You show up to work and nobody really wanted to go out there because you didn't want to be on the front page of the paper for doing your job. And we thought, well, maybe we could combat the negativity with positivity. And the worst thing that could ever happen as a police officer is a knock on your door, a telephone call that you're not coming home. And every time they hear that, or the funeral, like Officer Familia, they get back to that day. But if we can show up, almost like a Make-A-Wish Foundation Extreme Home Makeover for police, knock on their door, make a phone call, put a smile on their face, and maybe treat them to a vacation or something to get their mind off of it, it can show them that not every knock or telephone call is going to be negative, and maybe put a smile on their face just for a little bit. This incident, we actually started a fund for Officer Familia, and actually special memorative shirts. So if anybody wants to go donate, especially being that she's from the Bronx, BlueLivesMatterNYC.org, they can go do it. 100% of the proceeds are going to go to this family.
All righty, Joseph Imperatrice, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. And once again, our thoughts and prayers continue to be with you as in this rough season.
Thank you very much.
All righty, listen, staying along those lines, our reporter Arlie Bacocco actually went to the vigil that was held for Officer Familia this past week. She brings us that story.
Lives cut short just days from each other were remembered outside Bronx Lebanon Hospital. That's where on June 30th, Dr. Henry Bello, a former employee, fired shots, killing Dr. Tracy Tam from Queens, who was covering a shift for a friend, and injuring several workers. Then days later, in the early morning of July 5th, another shooting. A 12-year veteran with the NYPD, police officer Miosotis Familia from the 46th precinct, was shot execution style by this gunman, identified as Alexander Bonds, while seated in a mobile command unit near East 183rd Street and Creston Avenue.
But right now we're just grieving and mourning the loss of these bright, young individuals who just wanted to make a difference in their communities. Dr. Tam wanted to help people get better and heal, and Officer Familia, what she wanted to do was help make her community safe.
A doctor approached me, holding his left hand, saying that he was shot.
Just yards from where people were gathered to pay tribute to both, Bronx Lebanon patient transporter Bernard Blondell shared he was completely unaware of the drama unfolding. All he knew is that the patient he was treating had to get to the ER. Due to a fire happening at the same time, the elevators were shut down, leaving him and others with no choice but to act fast.
I grabbed the sheet, wrapped it around his torso. Everybody grabbed up his body. We lifted him up and we went down the stairs, 11 flights.
Now, days later, after hearing the full report, Blondell had this to say.
Now we have to pay attention to our surroundings at work, in a hospital where you're supposed to be safe. So, but that's anywhere. Now you have to pay attention to everywhere you go, no matter where you're at. Nothing is off limits. Nothing is sacred anymore.
At the prayer vigil organized by Local 1199 and other unions, state elected leaders, including State Assemblyman Victor Pichardo, called for more accountability for gun buyers, and State Assemblyman Felix Ortiz from the 51st Assembly District introduced legislation to charge buyers with a $250,000 gun liability registration.
$250,000 will not bring their life back, but I will tell you this much, we'll keep those guns owners accountable and responsible for their actions and for their irresponsibility for leaving those guns unattended.
New York City Councilman Andy King on Officer Familia, who was a Bronx native and mother of 3.
For our officer who was executed, the love will continue to shine in our hearts for her. She made the ultimate sacrifice of protecting and serving and gave her life.
Notes continue to flood the board here as the community recovers from not just one senseless act of violence, but now another, with both the result of guns getting into the wrong hands. For BronxNet, this is Arlene Makoko.
And thank you, Arlene. And as we continue very briefly our conversation, you saw there you got the doctor on one hand, then you have also Officer Familia, both tied to gun violence. But obviously, a lot of good things can actually come out of this. And it's hard to say that, but really there are some good things that can actually come out of this, and that's community actually coming together.
It's crazy because in New York City, you never expect to have an active shooter situation like we did last week. And it brings home that this can really happen. And this world, we're in a rough place. We really need to start coming together. What I was really, really impressed about and thought it was a good move was Reverend Al Sharpton brought the family of Officer Familia up, put aside any differences he may or may not have had, and donated to the cause. And that's what we need. We need the political figures of that sense to start showing and setting an example. Because, like I said earlier, it does start from the top, and that's a big step forward. I would love to be able to work with groups like that or any other group, because any movement or group starts for a great reason. It's the other people that come along and tie it in for bad things and give it a bad name. Like I said, we need to start working together, and we're one. This is the greatest city in the world. We should be the capital where people look and say, New York City, we want to be like them. And if we could start by making this the safest, literally, biggest city in the world, I think we're on a right and good path.
That's right. Joseph Imperatrice from Blue Lives Matter, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us again.